ערב טוב לכולם, אני רואה שכרגע נכנסים, אנחנו נחכה עוד איזה 2 דקות שכולם ייכנסו, נרשמו לוובינר הזה הרבה אנשים, אז אנחנו ניתן להם את האפשרות להיכנס. It's about 80 people that registered to this webinar, so let's wait nice. For yeah. So let's wait 1 or 2 minutes. אוקיי, אז אנחנו בעצם נתחיל עוד 2 דקות, ניתן לכולם הזדמנות להיכנס, אנחנו גם משודרים ביוטיוב, בערוץ יוטיוב באקסל סטודיו, וכבר אנחנו נתחיל, אני אציג אם יש לנו כבוד היום, אם לא ראיתם את הפרסום, אם לא קראתם את הפרסום, אז אנחנו, מיד אני אספר לכם אם יש לנו כבוד, אוקיי? אז אוקיי, אז בואו נתחיל, אוקיי? מי שיגיע יוכל להיכנס, גם כן עם הכישורים, עדיין הם זמינים, כל מי שרוצה אחרי זה יכול להיכנס, וגם לצפות בהקלטה שתהיה ב-DXL Studio, בערוץ יוטיוב שלי. אז אני מתכבד מאוד ככה לארח את סליה אלבס, שהיא בעצם MVP, אקסל MVP, שמגיעה אלינו מטורונטו, וסליה היא למעשה יועצת ומדריכה והדריכה, והיא מאוד מאוד מבוקשת בעולם, ככה שזה ממש כבוד. אני חיכיתי חודשים שהיא תתפנה, כי היא בן אדם מאוד מאוד עסוק, ולשמחתי נענתה, ואני שמח לארח אותה. אז בואו נברך אותה. כמובן כל ההדרכה תהיה באנגלית, חוץ מהדברים שלי. אם יש לכם שאלות, אתם יכולים לרשום את זה בצ'אט, גם בעברית אתם יכולים לרשום, אני אנסה לתרגם, וככה נצלח את זה. אז good evening, Celia. How are you?
Hi, good evening, Shlomi. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me to this webinar. I told the audience a little bit of who are you, and that I waited for a lot of months because you are a very busy person.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that it's eventually happens. I want to pass you the microphone, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe I can share my screen, and I have different topics there to present, even to talk a little bit about what I do, and then we will go to our topic.
Great.
Share screen.
If there will be any question, maybe in Hebrew, so I will translate and...
yeah, so if there are any questions, please take note, and then every now and then we can pause for questions. I will be presenting 2 or 3 examples, so maybe at the end of each example, if people have questions.
Great.
Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you again for the invitation. My name is Celia Alves. I am an Excel consultant, I have my own business, Solvent Excel Consulting. I create solutions for businesses based in Excel. I work exclusively or almost exclusively with Excel. And inside Excel, of course, we have many tools available. Besides the Excel features themselves, we have VBA, Power Query, Power Pivot. And when we combine them all together, we can make wonderful things, powerful tools for businesses to help them save time. And so my focus is mostly with task automation. About my professional background and academic background, I studied mathematics back in Portugal. I used to live there until 2013. And so I studied mathematics, and mathematics and education. I taught in high school for about 20 years. And then in 2013, that's when I moved to Canada with my husband and kids. And after a while, I ended up discovering Excel. So until then, I had used Excel for about 20 years without even knowing about VLOOKUP, for example. That's how I was using Excel for all that time. And when in here, I was presented with a couple of challenges, and I started to study, to take a few courses, to follow a lot of YouTube channels, and I just started to realize the power that Excel had, and I had no idea about that. So I started to automate things in different companies where I worked, and then I realized that that was what I liked. I enjoyed doing, so I created my own business, and that's the type of service that I offer today to my clients. I never left being a teacher. So I have a YouTube channel, Solve and Excel, Celia Alves Solve Excel, and I share content there mostly related to Excel and Power Query. And in 2019, I also created a Meetup group, a community here in Toronto, the MS Excel Toronto Meetup group. We are about just over 2,000 members at the moment. The sessions initially were in person, but now because of the pandemic and everything, they are still online exclusively. So anyone is welcome. You can, at the end, I'll show you the link, and whoever is interested can go and check the Meetup group. We have speakers from all over the world once every month. So feel free to check that and register. All the sessions are for free. And in 2020, I got the MVP award by Microsoft. It's the second year that I am with that community. It's amazing to be part of that group of professionals who have a close contact with the Excel team. So we are aware of what's going on with the product, what are they up to at the moment to keep evolving and improving this tool that is already so cool, so fantastic. So it's a great experience as well, and an honor to be part of that group. So today we are going to talk about the M code and how we can use the M code in Power Query to do a little bit more even than what we can do without touching the M code. As you all know here, I hope I'm speaking to, I'm considering that I'm speaking to an audience that has an idea of what Power Query does and has tried it or at least seen it a few times. Excuse me. And so my focus today will be not to teach Power Query itself, but to show a few examples of what's going on with the code behind the scenes when we create a query, and show you where we can learn about that code and how we can find what we need when sometimes we are trying to solve problems with Power Query and what we have in the ribbon is not enough. So, but we will get there. So that's what I'll be talking about. When I'm looking to the side, I'm not seeing my camera, but it's because I'm using two monitors. So excuse me for that. What is the M language and how to access the code, and some learning resources where we can learn about that, and some examples. So what is the M language and how can I learn? The M language is the language, the programming language behind the scenes in Power Query. Power Query in this board here, we can see is available in multiple tools and in multiple ways, let's call it like that. So we have Power Query Online, Power Query Desktop, and the M language, it's the M engine, data flows and all that. And we have multiple tools by Microsoft that use Power Query one way or the other. Not all of them use Power Query the same way. My focus today is with Excel for Windows. So I'm considering that we are working with Excel on the desktop and we create our queries there. What can we do with those queries to when we find a situation where what we have available by the tool, all the buttons that it gives us are not enough, is not enough. So I will show you a few links where you can find this type of information. This is all documentation by Microsoft. I have here a couple of links. Let me maybe show you. Let's see if this opens here. Let me bring you this web page here. So if you search for Microsoft Docs, you will, or docs.microsoft.com, that's what I meant here. You can find the Power Query documentation page. There's all the information here about Power Query. And at some point we have the Power Query M formula language, where we have how the language works, how we can learn. And one thing that I use very often is the Power Query M function reference. So when we come here, we get all the different categories of functions available. So inside the M code, we have functions like we have in Excel, right? In Excel, we have the logical functions, the statistical functions, the financial functions, all those things there. So, and then inside each category, we have different functions available. Same thing happens inside the M code. And these are the different categories. So for example, just about tables, if we click there, then we see all the different functions related to tables that allow us to do something with tables. And in here, so for example, let's say I think we will probably go see one example that uses table column names. Let's see if I can find it here. Table, column names. Where is it? Did I pass it?
Yeah, it's
here, column names here. So when we click there, then in here we have examples. It explains what the function does. It explains which parameters it needs to work. And then sometimes it has some examples. So from here, some functions are better documented than others. They are still working. On the documentation. But from here, we can sometimes solve our problems, find information that can help us. Just by looking at the list of the functions we have here, it may give me some ideas. Oh, I didn't know it was possible to find the column names of a table. We don't have a button, at least that I am aware. In Power Query, we don't have a button that says column names, that we click there and it generates the column names of a table. But we can use this function and get that list inside our queries if we need to. So just wanted to point this out. We have plenty of documentation available and we can use that. Okay, so going back here. The M language we will see, we can work with it in two places. One is inside the bar, the formula bar, and the other one is inside the advanced editor where we can have access to the code and we can work with it directly there. I'll show you that. So what's important is to be curious. One of the things I always say, keep your formula bar visible. Keep an eye on what's going on there, even if you are just starting with Power Query. And if you are just starting with Power Query, I don't recommend that you worry too much with the M code. You have other things that you need, that it's more important that you learn first. Just try to get acquainted with all the options available that you have available on the tool, on the ribbon. But every time you click a button to do a new step in Power Query, take a look at what's going on inside the formula bar, just to start getting acquainted with the type of code that it generates. And then with time, you will be able to do more with that. I wanted to give a disclaimer, present a disclaimer here. I am not a programmer. I didn't study programming in school behind just a a basic class on programming when I studied in university. So what I'm teaching you today, I am just sharing a few things that I have been learning along the way while trying to solve the problems that clients present me with, and I trying to help them. And then when I find something that I think, oh, this is interesting, this can happen again, other people maybe could make good use of this. So I'm trying to share just some of those tips. Okay. So let's see some examples. The first example will focus on the fact that we can extract values from one single cell in a Power Query table. Usually we are used to the fact when we are working with queries, we see that we transform an entire column, we transform an entire table, but we can go and pick exactly that specific cell, that specific value if we need to. So that's what I'm going to show you now. I'm going to stop to share, and I'll share again from another screen, okay? So sharing again, if I find my tools here, share screen, and I'm just going to share this screen here because the other one, okay. Not sure if it is possible to hide this.
What?
Is it possible to hide or to move this to another? Oh, I can move it to the other screen, so it's not in the way. Can you see my file explorer here?
Yeah.
Okay. So in this example, I have here, and I'm going maybe to stop my video here. Okay. In this example, I have a folder where every month I receive files from different store locations. And I have this argument with this discussion with the managers because they are very creative, and every month they send me the file with a different name or a different structure, a name structure. So the person from Calgary just types in Calgary, the other guy in Edmonton puts in capital letters and then adds in the month. The other one just puts in the store code. So I don't have a consistent file naming. Sometimes we use the file names in our queries because they are very consistent, and we can use those names to extract some information, some parameters, for example, that we need. In this case, I cannot rely on that. So I'm not going to pick up a fight with them. I'm just going to work around the fact that they will never send me the files with the names that I want. So I'm going to deal with that and find another way. Inside these files, if we open the file, it happens that I have the store code in there. So if we look here in cell row 1, cell C, so C1, I have the code for this location. It's for the Calgary store, and same thing for the other stores. So the report is consistent, and it comes with the code in that specific cell, column 3, row 1. Okay, so I can work with that. Let's see what we can do to bring those codes into our query. So I already have a file here that says all store sales. And in this file, I already have a table. Oh, Shlomi, if I ever forget to zoom in, if it is too small, please let me know, okay? And I'll zoom in.
Yeah.
So I have a file here that already has, maybe, let's see where I can put this. It's on the way, there. I have a file here that already has the query. Let me show you data, queries and connections. And in this case, this is a query that is connecting to a folder. And all of you who have worked with Power Query, connecting to a folder to bring all the information from that folder know that when we create a connection to a folder, Power Query goes ahead and creates these different helper queries, okay? Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry too much about this. What we need to know is that the store reports is my main query, is the query that I created when I went data, get data from folder, okay? Control-Shift+ to zoom in a little bit. And let me close these here on the left for now. Here are the different steps. So I'm connecting to a certain folder, and then it does these automatic steps when I am extracting the files from the folder. We can see the files here with the different names. And then I did a couple of things here. And at some point I had my data, I expanded my data, and I have all my information. I have, when we do this, I have a column with my file's name, my file names, but as we know, we cannot rely on that. So I went ahead and removed that column. Okay, so now I have the information about the sales from the different stores, but I don't know what belongs where. I don't have a column here to tell me what are the sales from, which sales are from each store. When we go here to the helper queries, we have the transform sample file. This file here, this query here is where we explain to Power Query what it needs to do with each one of the files individually from that folder before we combine them all together. So for example, if I already have a few steps built here as well, let me close this pane. The source step shows us the file as I showed you before. You see, we have the code there, the store, a couple of columns, but my data only starts in row 3. So then I removed those 2 columns on top. I promoted the first row as 2 headers. And then I did another step to split here these 2 elements, the client ID and the client name. And now I have my information ready from one file, and then this will be applied to all the files, and at the end will be combined everything together into just one table, the data from all the files in that folder. Okay, but I still don't have the name of my store, but I know that name was here, my code, my store code was here. So that's what we will be doing now. How can I rescue that element that I left behind when I removed those 2 rows and now I need it? At the end of the step, at the last step, we can create a new step. When we click all these buttons here at the top in Power Query, every time we do an action, we create one step and the code comes here, right? The code comes here, shows here in the formula bar. And if we want to, we can also come here to View Advanced Editor, and we can see the code in here. This is the M code language, the M language, okay? In another example, we will come here. For now, we don't need to. So, and what I wanted to point is that, in fact, let me go back here to the Advanced Editor. What I wanted to point is that by default, every time we create a new step, let me put this bigger and then I need to zoom again. So the Control-Shift+ is the shortcut to zoom in. Okay, so what Power Query does is, before the equal, we have the name of the step. And when we create a new step, by default, it applies one M function to the step before. So here is the name of the step before. In the next step, this is the name of the step, we have a new function, and now it's applying this operation, this transformation to the table that we have in the step before. Remove top rows was the name of the step before. This is what Power Query does by default when we are interacting with the user interface, but we can, in the code, refer to steps before. It's not mandatory that we always refer to the last step, okay? So that's what we are going to do here. I am in the last step that we have in the query. I come here, click this button. It creates a new step for me here. It named that step custom 1, but we will change that. And in fact, let me go here before, let me rename this step. Let me rename this step to base. So base, this is my data as I have it at that moment after doing those transformations and before I now do the rest of my work. I like having names with just one word because they make the code simpler. We don't need to put the hashtag and double quotes if the name only has one word. So for example, here, it's referring to source. We don't need the source between double quotes and with the hashtag. Okay, so let me pause a little bit to see if this is not too confusing. Let me delete this step and start again. We had a bunch of steps. I changed the name of the last step to base, okay? Now I want to come here, create a new step, but I don't want it to look at the base step. I want it to look at the source step because that's where my code, store code is. Okay, so now I say, go back to the source step. Okay. And sometimes we press enter, it doesn't work. We can click here and now it applies my code. Okay, so now we are back to the source step. You see, source step, we are back to the same place. Now from this source step, I'm interested in getting this value here. This value here, the source represents the table we have in that step with all the data. Column 3, I want column 3, row 1. Okay, so if I type column 3 between square brackets, enter, I extract just that one column and it comes in the shape of a list. Now, inside this list, I only want this value in the first row. Because Power Query is zero indexed, zero indexed, I think it's the correct expression. It means that it starts counting the rows from 0. This row will be row 0. So now to indicate the first element of that list, I use curly brackets and indicate, I put a 0 there. And there we go. Now we have the value extracted from that source table. We could do the other way around. We could have done first put the row, okay? And it gives us all the fields and their values. If we go to the source, the columns are column 1, column 2. These are the field names up to 5, and then, or up to 6. And then the first row only has 2 fields with values, column 2 and column 3. So that's what we see in here. Okay, so this is a record. It's the collection values inside a row in that table. And then I can put the column. So now I can say, okay, from this record, I want column 3. So I add the column name. You can do row and then column, or column and then row. It's the same thing. In the end, the result, of course, is the same. Okay, so now I have this value. I can give it a name. In this step, I'm going to rename, and I'm going to call this store code. No spaces, store code. Okay, so now I have the store code. I can go back to the base table where I was and now add a column with my store code. Remember that we are working in this query transform sample file. This query works with one file only. We are working with just the data from one file. To explain Power Query, what it needs to do with that file, and then at the end, we will combine everything from all the files we have in the folder. We have 3 files there. It could be more, it doesn't matter. It will apply the same thing to all the files. Okay, so I want to go back to base. I am in this step. I'm going to create a new step there. And I'm going to say, you see, when I create a new step, Power Query always picks up the last step. That's not what I want. I want the step base. In fact, I didn't need that, but it's just simpler to explain like that. So I'm back to base. And now on this table, I'm going to add a column. Add a column, a custom column, not a custom, yes, a custom column. And what is it that I want to put in that table? I want to put a column, I can call it store. That's the name of the column. And throughout the column, I want it to type in the store code, the value that we stored in this step here on the right, okay? So let's say okay. And look at that, now we have a new column that has that value there, okay? This step here that is just recalling the base, we don't need it because here it says, go to the, oh, in fact, we don't need it if we put base here. So I can eliminate this step custom one. If I come here and I say, what we have here, table.add column, I want to add a column to which table? To the table base, okay? So if I do that, I don't need this step now anymore, okay? I can delete it, no need to keep extra steps. So we have this table here with a few steps, then we created a new step, store code, then we added a new column to this previous table where all the elements have the store code. Okay, so this is what we need. Now watch what happens when we go back to the store reports, our main query that collects everything from all the reports. Let's see what's in there. Now we have our new column. And if we go and check in the filter here, we can see that we have all the codes from all the 3 stores. Nice and clean, everything consistent. I don't have to worry about those file names that are not consistent, okay? So now I could, of course, then first change data types and close and load. It's always good, it's always important to change the data types at the end or verify if everything is okay. So I did Control A, transform. Let's see here the tag data type. And then we could check if the types that Power Query assigned to each thing, to each column, if they are correct. We can assume for this example that they are correct. So not to worry about this. Close and load. And now our table here should come, okay, there we go. So now our data has a new column with the data that, the information that we needed. And now we could test, unless people want me to do that, but it's probably best to jump to the next example. Now, if I added a new file here for a new store, new code, I just need to come to my query, right-click, refresh, and I would get the new data there with the new code, whatever the code is in that file. So this is my first example. It's just one example to show how we can take advantage of doing some tweaks with the M code and do a little bit more. If I was not doing this way, maybe it would be more difficult, or I would have to be changing the file names by myself manually. But sometimes there's a lot of files and that's not something we want to do. Let me know, Shlomi, are there any questions about this? Am I explaining too fast, too slow?
The only comment is impressive.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, it's impressive, yeah.
I hope it helps people and that they can take note and apply this at their jobs. That's what it's important. So I'm going to close this one and I'm going to show you another example. If anyone has seen other presentations I've done in the past, probably you have seen me explaining this. I'm going to explain again because that's one of the things that people ask more when it comes to creating connections to in Power Query. So what happens here? I have this folder. Let's see if this is, I cannot make it bigger. No. like that. I have this folder. It has 4 files. They are all CSV files. And each file has cumulative data compared to the previous one. What I mean is, for example, this file has data from January only. So it's 2019 and this January data, it's sorted, it goes up to the 31st, okay? And then the February file is a file that has the same structure. And now it has all the data from January, and then February. So it has the accumulation of the 2 reports. And then March has from January up to March and so on, okay? So this is just our scenario here. It could be something else, but that's what happens here. Then I created a file with a report, with a query, I mean, that is connecting to one of the files. So if I show you data, queries and connections, and if I come here to our connections pane, we see that we only have 1 query. So this one is even simpler than the other one because there's no folder. It is connecting to just 1 file. If we double click in our query, I will Control-Shift+. Okay, if we double click in our query and we go to the source step, the very first step here at the top, we can see that it's using csv.document file contents. So it's picking up the contents of a CSV file that is located in this path. And when we go get data from CSV text file or from Excel workbook or something like that, Power Query writes the path to the file that we are pointing to and hard codes that. It means that path is that. Is that what is written in the code? That's what we will have. That's what Power Query will know. Power Query will always look for that specific path. Okay, that is a problem. That can be a problem for 2 reasons. Let me close the query for now. So 2 things that, at least 2 things that can happen. One is that, well, next month I want my query to point to the February file, not to the January. So how can I make it work? If my query only knows about the January file. How can I make it so that, for example, the user can come here? In this case, we would have January, may come here and choose another month and get the query reading from the Excel sheet. Oh, the user wants February, so let's pick up that file, not the January one. That's one thing. Another problem with the hard code paths is that if I open this same file on another machine, on another user session on my machine, or if I have this, for example, on Dropbox, like I have this one, or OneDrive on a shared folder, the path won't be recognized, or it may be different. Most of the times it will be different for another user in another machine. So the query won't work, and we don't want to be tweaking the path manually every time we need to run the query from another location, from another machine. So the trick that I use here is to first teach Excel how to know the path in the current file where the file is being used. So we are not talking about running files online on OneDrive or SharePoint. I'm talking about using files on the desktop, okay, local files. They can be synchronized through OneDrive, through SharePoint, through Dropbox or any other cloud service, but they are downloaded to my machine and I'm using them locally. Okay, what can I do? So one of the things I do is in here, in this one cell, I create a formula in Excel that Excel can use to know the path where the current file that is open, what the path is for that file. Let me show you here on the side. In there, I use the let function just to make it smaller, but in here I'm going to use other function. Not everyone has the let function. Those of you with older versions of Excel may not have it, so I'm going to use, I'm going to do this differently. Okay, so what we will do is in one cell, anywhere, I come here and I go cell, that's one function in Excel. And then it gives me a couple of parameters and I choose file name, okay, comma. And then I can add a reference and I should do that, add a reference to my current worksheet. I just need to point to any cell in this spreadsheet. It can be A1, any cell in this spreadsheet. When I press enter, I get this, all the path.
Just a minute, Celia.
Yeah.
I think I did something, but I don't know what. Okay, now it's okay. Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Did we let me know if I need to pick up from some point, or I can continue from where I was?
Yes, you continue. You can continue. Yes.
Okay. So I can, by typing this formula, cell, and then in between double quotes, file name, comma, and then A1 or A2, any cell reference in this sheet. The result of this formula is the path to this current file. And then at the end, I have in between square brackets, I have the file name. If you see, it's the file name I have here at the top. And then sheet 2 is the name of my sheet. Okay. What I'll do is, okay, I'm going to pick up the file from the path from the current file, and then I'm going to make sure my files are in the same folder or in a folder where I can explain where the folder is based on the folder where my current file is. So we could call this a relative folder. And in this case, I have the sales report inside this folder 02 dynamic path to source file, doesn't matter. And inside the same folder, I have the subfolder with the data source files. Okay, so what I'll do is I want that path here, but just up to where we have the search, the square brackets, right? So I can come here and say search, that's a function in Excel. Search what? Search the square bracket in between double quotes, comma, where? In this code here, and that's it. When I do this, it gives me 72, telling me that this character here is in position 72. So now I can go and say, give me the left characters, the first few characters from that path there. And I want the 72 characters. Let's see, is it 72 characters that I want? Not really, because I still have the square bracket there. So I want 72 minus 1, right? In fact, what I should have done here was to point to that cell minus 1. Okay, so now doing this, if I leave this on this cell, every time I open my workbook, it doesn't matter in which machine, it will give me the correct path for that file in that machine, okay? So from here, I know how to explain where my files are. Okay, where are my files? My files are in this path, dynamic path to source file, and then inside a folder called all sales files, okay? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say it's in that folder concatenated with all sales. What was that? All sales files, I think it was. Yeah. Yeah. So there we go. And then we can even add the backslash. Okay. And then my file specifically, for example, the file with my data. In this case, it's not like the other one where the store managers didn't pay attention to the file names. In this case, all the file names have the same structure. All sales, space, dash, space, up to, and then it has the year and the month, year and month, year and month. So to make this faster, I'm going to show you the formula that I have here. It's already the same thing. So what I did here, maybe not so big, in here I have that formula that gives me the path to the current file. In here, I created a cell to put in the year, a cell to put in the month. And in here, I combined all these things together. You see that the formula is referring to these three cells. And what the formula does is picks up all this, then concatenates with, I don't know if you can see it there, maybe it's too small here on the formula bar, but it says, I put in the name of the file, and then concatenated with B1, which is where I have the year, and then concatenated with the dash, and then concatenated with the month, but inside a text function so that I'm sure that I have 2 digits, and then the extension of the file, .csv. So in summary, I'm just putting a formula here in Excel that now I will use this formula to put inside my query so that the query knows exactly where to find the data. Okay, so first thing to do here is to give a name to this cell. This cell B3 is where this formula lives, is where the result of the formula is where the path is. I'm going to give this, let's say, file path. So in here, I'm typing in here in the name box. You can give it the name you want and press enter. So now the name of that cell, instead of saying B3, you can say file path, okay? Now, let's go back to our query and let's make some changes here so that we don't have that problem with our file. In the first, that's the moment where we go to view and advanced editor, and we can work with the code here. A little bit bigger. So it starts with this step here, source. And what we need to do is to create a previous step that I'm going to call source 0. And I'm going to pick up, let's see if I have my cheat sheet here, or maybe here, let's see. I could have copied, I have that in the spreadsheet as well. I'm going to copy this code. I could explain why the code is like that, but I think we don't have much time. So what I'm going to say, all you need to do is to take note of this code, excel.currentworkbook, open, close parentheses. You can take a picture if you want. And then there's a bunch, there's curly brackets, and then there's name. And this name here is what we will need to change in each situation. And then the rest of the things, just leave it like that. The content, column 1, 0. So with this piece of code here, I want to put the name that I gave to that cell that has the information that I want to bring into my query that tells the query where the data is. So file path. At the end, I'm going to put a comma because in the M code, all the steps need a comma at the end, except that very last step here before the in. This step here does not have a comma. Okay, no, nor the other one here. Okay, and now, so I say source 0 is the value inside of a named range with this name, and then there's a column there, there's one row there, pick up what's in there. It's similar to what we've done in the previous example. Now, in the source step, instead of thinking of this specific path, just pick whatever the source 0 step tells you. Source 0 gives you the path, and then use that value here. Okay, so let's do done. Everything seems okay here. Let's go home and close and load too. And now let's test. It's loading. So I have my cells here pointing to 2019 January. What? And let's see the data. Data here is just January. Okay. What if I put a 2 here? Now I want to bring data up to February. Right click, refresh. Let's go down, or we could just check on the filter. There we go. Now we have January and February. So it's picking up the data from the February file, and so on and so on. Now I don't have 2020. If I have a different folder for the 2020 data, or 2021, I could type in, change the year, change the month for the file, and Power Query, just with doing refresh, will be able to pick up. Now we have March, January, February, and March. And this technique can be used for any value that you need to integrate from your Excel spreadsheet into your query. So for example, let's say you wanted to add a field here where the user could enter a date, so that in the end, we filter the data to bring data only from a certain date, for example. It's the same thing. You create a cell, you give it a name, and then you put that code there that I showed you in the query and use that parameter. You created a new parameter there. So that's the code here. That's what I used. The only thing that needs to be changed is the name of the range every time we do this in Power Query. And I think we don't have much time left, right? I had another example, but I think it would probably go over the hour. I'm not sure if you prefer me to do that or just take questions. And
we have a few questions, so
okay.
let us start with the question. And if
sure.
Okay, so where's the chat? Okay, you can see on the chat.
Let's see. Okay, I have the chat here.
What if the name Idan referred to the first example? What if the name of the store appears in a different cell?
Oh yeah, so that each example is always a different challenge, right? Usually we have the ability we work with more or less consistent reports, but my advice is, if you are in charge of collecting information from different locations in your company and you are accepting different files from each place, stop that. You just create a template and you say, everybody, from now on, I just want the data in this file. That's the first thing you need to do, because otherwise you are spending your time, your precious time, doing things manually every time, just because each one does the way they want it to do. So just create one template and make sure it comes there. One trick, if you need to really have the
different structure.
A different structure, if you need to have that in different places for some reason, if you have the chance, the ability to give a name to that cell, if you can make them give a name to that cell, then you can say, from each file, bring me the value from that name, and you would use the same, it's not the same, but it's a similar approach. You need to filter, see what the file has, look for a named range, that specific named range, for example, store code. And even if it is in a different position, that could be a way. But every time we do a little change in the requirements, sometimes it can seem a simple change, but sometimes it can take a lot of work to just be sure to address that little change.
Okay. So the basic thing in this approach that it should be the same structure of the file in order to work.
If it's not, then we will have to code how to find the cell that we want, and we would have to find a way. It depends. Each case would be different. Yeah.
Okay. Ben is asking, can you explain how to use the helper query with the other files?
With the other files, explain to use the helper query. So I'm thinking maybe related to, that example where I showed the folder. Let's see. Not sure if I understand the question. So if the person wants to repeat the question or explain better, but I'm going to do my best here let me just share my screen again.
This was referring to I think the first example, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, where
exactly.
So where we have helper query.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is let me create a new file so we have this folder with files, right? And I want to combine the information from all the files. Mm-hmm. If the files all have the same structure, that helper query transform sample file is what Power Query will use for us to explain it, what we want it to do with each file. We from all these files, we take one as a sample, we explain what to do with just that one, and then Power Query creates a function. So maybe instead of creating a new file, I'll use this one. So when we go and do like this, data, get data from file, from folder, and then I go and pick up, let me find here my folder, just a second. Okay.
I think because we're usually working with the ribbon, so we see that
it comes up, but right?
No, we see the steps. Where one step is depending on the previous one. Mm-hmm. But now you showed us that.
Okay, so I went and pointed to that folder.
Yeah.
Okay, and do open. When I do this, I'm creating. Oh, let's see. Maybe I did not do this correct. Let's see. From file, from folder. Maybe I did from file.
Yeah.
And here there's my folder and choose open. Okay. When I do this, it goes to the folder and I say transform data. Okay. And it creates, let's see what we have here. It creates just the store reports. Store reports is the query that I created now. But when I come here and I say expand the data in all these little files, because each one of those has one file, it opens this window that says specify the settings for each file. Sample file, first file, that's what it comes up by default, but we could pick up any of the files to serve as sample. Maybe if we have a situation where one file is more complete than the others and gives us more material to work with and explain all the steps we need, maybe we want to pick another file that it's not the first one. But usually we just go with the first file. And then because this is a CSV, these are CSV files, there are other parameters here related to CSV files. And I just say, okay, watch here on the left. When we do this, expand, Power Query creates this folder here, transform sample file from store reports. This is my main query. These are the helper queries to help with understanding what we want Power Query to do with the files in that folder. It has different files here. This one is the function that when we see here, let's see if I can put this bigger. When we see the steps here in our main report, a main query, we see that at some point it says invoke custom function 1. Okay, and this is the step. And here we see that is using the transform file, the transform file function. This is the function that Power Query created by itself, and now it's using that function to combine all the information. Okay, what is that function does? This function has the same steps. If we look into the steps here, has the same steps. Maybe not sure if, okay, let's see. Has the same steps as this one here that says transform sample file. Transform sample file only has one step for now. Let's say, for example, now I go and say, oh, remove the top 3 rows. So remove rows remove top rows, 2 rows. Okay. And now I say promote the first row as headers.
Use first row.
Where is it? Home.
Yeah.
Use first row as headers. Here. Okay. So I have source, remove top rows, promoted headers, and change type that I don't want. I'm going to delete. If we now pick into the function, we see that the function copied all those steps here. Remove top rows, promoted headers. You see? So it's a simple way that it's just, this is amazing. It's just a very easy way that Power Query offer us to do what the mess we want without knowing code, because to be a function, it needs to start with this and then let and whatnot. But we don't need to worry about that. We just need to say, okay, in this transform sample file, explain me what you want me to do, and then I'll copy the steps to this function, and then I'll use this function in my expansion step here. When I expanded the content, I invoked the custom function that you created here. And the beautiful thing about this is then at some point I say, oh, wait, you know what? I don't need to bring all the columns. I just need these 2 first columns. So I go to the transform sample file. The transform sample file works with 1 file only, which chose to be the first file in the folder. And I say, remove other columns. Okay. So now that I made this change in the transform sample file, my function evolved and now contains that step, removed other columns. And now my main query here, I need to delete this thing here. My main query now also, is it this one or is it this one? Sample file from store reports. And now my query here has only the 2 columns plus this one with the file names. So I said on my transform sample file, I said that I just wanted date and client. Okay, so now at the end, I just give you date and time and client, plus this one with the file names that I can remove if I want. I can come here and delete this. So every time I make a transformation in this file, I explain what to do with 1 file, and that action will be applied to all the files in the folder. If we come here to view query dependencies, this gives us a schema of how the different queries are related. And we have the folder. From that folder, we have the sample file query. And we have a function that this function is what is used in our main query. So all these folders are really just helpers. All these folders, no, all these queries are just helpers. And our main query, which is this one only uses the sample file and the transform file function. But the transform sample file is a query that we have there at hand, offered to us to do whatever we want with it. And then whatever we explain Power Query to do in there, it will be transferred to the function that Power Query uses to apply to all the files in the folder. Not sure if if I'm explaining too much or too little or too,
no, it's
complex.
okay.
I don't know.
I understand. Okay. No, explaining great.
Let me know if it is explanation. And so the other ones, the parameter is and the sample file. So the sample file is the query that picks up the file that we choose to be the sample, and the parameter is just another helper piece here that allows Power Query to put all these things together to then automate all the steps for us without us having. We don't even have to understand any of that. We just need to accept that every time we connect to a folder, we get all these helper queries here. And the only one we need to worry about is the transform sample file. Okay.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Oh, I can also say something here since we are talking about folders. You know that thing that I explained for the dynamic path if we want to make the dynamic, the data source path to be dynamic and to be recognized in all the machines and all that. Mm-hmm. In that example, I showed with one file only. If we want to do that with the connection to a folder, then we need to make that change with the source 0 step, add it to the main query in the folder, and then go also to the sample file. If we pick up here in the sample file, the first step also has the folder path hard-coded. So we need to also come here, create the source 0 step with that formula that I showed you that brings in what's in that cell, and then outer source step to read from source 0. So you need, my point is, if you are connecting to a folder, you need to do that change in 2 places, in the main query and in the sample file query. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
We need to change it from hard-coded to the parameters. To the
parameters, so that so that we don't have to be dealing with things manually all the time, having to. There's one thing that I also wanted to point. When we do these changes with connections to folders, mm-hmm. sometimes Power Query gives us an error that says firewall, whatever. One error that says it's something with firewall.
Yeah.
And how we can solve that in some circumstances is to come to File, Options and Settings, Query Options. And when we are working with local files that we have permission to access, and we are not transferring information, sending information to external databases or anything like that with our queries, then we can come here to Privacy under Current Workbook, not the global, under Current Workbook, Privacy, change here to ignore the privacy levels and potentially improve performance. So what Power Query does is, if you are reading, collecting information to a folder and you have 100 files in there, every time Power Query goes to pick up the information from one of the files, it will be checking if you have the correct permissions to access that folder. And this can make your file, your query slow, for one hand, and the other hand,
it will ask
Query doesn't like that parameter to have access to the folder through the parameter. Mm. So it will be asking you, do you have permission? Do you have permission? And then it gives you that error. So if you change this parameter here, you will work around that problem. Mm. So that's the other tip here. The problem is that every time you open the file from a new machine, a new location, or another user opens the file and uses the queries, needs to change the query setting, the privacy settings, unless you add a little bit of code, a VBA code on the open
file.
When you're opening the file, and it changes to change the permissions automatically. So that's another thing.
So the privacy level is per machine. It's not connected to the file. It's connected to the machine.
Yeah, it's per machine. And every time the file is open, a new user or a new machine opens even if you just change the file name. If you change the file name, it's inside the same machine, it will complain, and it will say, I think it will give you the same error if I'm not mistaken.
So we need to go and do it again.
Yeah, you need to go to query settings and change the
privacy level
settings. Yeah, privacy level.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Great tips. Let's see. I think this is all the question we have. Thanks, Guy and Idan and Amir. Thank you guys joining us. What is the time? Okay, whoa. Okay, so we're just on time. I want to just a minute. Stop. Okay. I want to say thank you very, very much, Celia,
My pleasure.
for the
Thank you too.
for the great webinar. I learned a lot from it, and and I hope
We always
to.
learn from each other, right? There's
Yeah,
always
of
something
course.
new. There's always
Yeah.
something.
It's
Yeah,
always
that's how Excel is in Power Query.
yeah. Curiosity. It's the name of the game.
Yes, and open mind.
An open mind.
And
Yeah.
yeah, always be willing to. Another advice that I always give is, okay, do the best you can today. If it is something, a recurring task that every month or every week you need to deal with it, the next time maybe you can improve something else. Maybe next time you can add a new formula that makes something more dynamic. So keep improving, trying to improve things. We don't need to do it all at once. We can go by steps.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you for the Israeli audience.
Can I just quickly share here my contact information and the
Yeah,
Meetup group?
of course.
So let me, I was going to forget about that.
Of course.
Am I sharing any screen? No.
No.
So screen 2 here. Okay, so I have another example, but I didn't have time. So in here I have my YouTube channel. Feel free to check that. It's the content is in English as well.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to check that there. Sometimes I do live classes. Usually, in the last few weeks, a few months, I haven't done that. But there's a playlist there about automation in Excel that combines Power Query, Excel features, VBA. So if you are interested, take a look at that. And this is the Meetup group in Toronto, MS Excel Toronto. Feel free to check that. This will be our next session is in 2 days. So on Wednesday, catching errors in Power Query for exception reporting with Christian Angel. He will be talking about how to deal with errors in Power Query. So you are all invited. It's free. And maybe it's a little bit late for you because it's at 5 p.m. Or 4 in Toronto.
So
but then
midnight,
if you register, if you register, then after the session, I send an email with the video recording on YouTube, some materials, if there are any files that are shared. So it's always good to register so that you can get that information.
Great.
And that's my contact information there. Feel free to take a peek as well and connect anywhere you'd like, any of the social media platforms that you like to use. I'll be around. Feel free to connect. I'm glad to connect with everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Shlomi.
Thank you, Celia. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the audience. And תודה רבה לכולם, וערב טוב, שיהיה לכם המשך ערב נעים. And have a good evening to all. And have a good day, Celia.
Thank you. You too. A good day and good night for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.